Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. And this is the final session this month with Nick and Jason. Hi, chaps.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. So thanks for joining us again. We're continuing on our journey for, as it says on the screen here, titled Creating Dynamic Titles on the Timeline, which also includes making fancy text quickly and making stuff look more expensive than the time taken on it. There you go. That's the unofficial title for it. Unofficial title for the title. Cool. And thanks, Kent, for checking before I asked. Yes, it's all working. You can hear it and see us and see the screen and that sort of thing. That's great. Hey there, Drake. Hey there, Jay. Thanks for joining us again. And thanks, Jason, also for the comment about the icons that we put up just before we start. So yes, Spencer on the sales team runs these. So we got to get one for Jason as well. But it's well spotted, it is the same artist. And also the usual housekeeping, we're running some new sessions next month, and we've got the information up on the usual link, which you'll get as an email with the automatically follow-up from the finish of this webinar. And we're looking a lot at color correction and fixing stuff inside that particular process before and after post as well. And we're going to throw in some resolve techniques. And although those techniques are in Resolve and things like Magic Bullet, these techniques and these concepts work with all sorts of different applications and hosts. And we're joined by some fantastic trainers, a couple of experts in Resolve and color grading and filmmaking as well. So there's the information on that. We'll send the link to, and also we're recording this session, as you've probably seen that little recording icon at the bottom of the screen. And you can see the recordings as per usual on the Maxon volume program training, where we've got a whole range of different clips. Here's last week's, where Jason and Nick went through creative transitions for editors. Fantastic. So what have I forgotten to cover? I think that's it, isn't it?
I think you got it in, yeah.
Got it, okay, fantastic. So as usual, please interrupt us for questions and just chuck those questions in and we'll just discuss those as we go along. And am I handing over to you, Nick, first of all?
No, me.
It's actually,
Jason. All right.
Jason. He has some cool stuff to show first.
Got it, okay, right. So I'll make you a presenter, Jason. Yep, and I'll kill my webcam as well. Always good for a plan.
Cool, so hopefully you can see my main screen.
Yes, all looking good.
Cool. The first thing I thought I'd run through is the text possibilities within Universe toolset, because as an editor, they're incredibly powerful and allow you to do things that are almost impossible in any edit software. Obviously, I work on Avid a lot, and for Avid, the type tool does almost nothing. And in fact, if you work on the latest version of Avid, on the latest version of Mac, you don't even have a type tool anymore. So these tools allow you to do a lot of things that you can't otherwise do. And within Premiere, you can do things really quickly. So you can see here on my monitor, I've got the Universe dashboard, which is, as we've discussed the last few weeks, is a really quick way to see the tools at hand. So I've just got the text selected, and I'll just whiz you through these quite quickly to show you what they do. Hacker text, we'll start with, does a number of things. You can see this text has got a glow and scan lines on it. If I come into the effect controls, so you can see you've got a range of, there's like loads of different attributes you can change to damage the quality of it. You've also got a load of presets. If we click on the presets, you can see a load of ready-made presets. Essentially, the main point of hacker text, which is what I use it for, is things like this example here, where I've got Moscow, Russia written in Cyrillic, and you could use it to make these sort of, you can see I've got like twitching letters and some of the elements twitch. And then at a certain point, it sort of bursts through a cycle of randomness and ends up in English. So that's something I've been tempted to use a couple of times on sports programs to sort of ident where you are. And you can see here at the moment, we're going from source to random to target. If I wanted to get rid of the random, we could just go source to target. And now that transition will literally just change from the Cyrillic text to the English text. I've also got some other things on it which are making various letters pop up, and you can have random letters come in. So I won't go into too much detail, but obviously within playing with all these, there's all kinds of extra bits you can do. But essentially that's the key to the tool, it lets you change from one form of text. Like it could also be from something completely random. You could just end up with random characters that form into your word. But I quite like, for me, the big thing is going from source through random to the target. So that's hacker text briefly. The next one that's also very useful for an editor is a thing called numbers. Basically, this allows you to generate all kinds of numbers. So this example here, I've got a temperature, and you can see I've keyframed the value. So basically, we just get to wind the temperature up to whatever you want to set it to. But the interesting thing down here, you can see the unit of measure. I've got it set to degrees Celsius. If you lived in the US or somewhere that has Fahrenheit, it's as simple as changing that. And you can see it's set to after. Likewise, I could also make that dollars, which that puts the dollar sign after. We'll put that at the beginning, as you'd expect. And now you can see it's counting up currency values. So it's a great way of counting up numbers, which is, I don't know of any other way to do that in Avid or Premiere. Obviously, you could do it with After Effects and dynamic link it. So this is quite a powerful tool. The other nice thing is that using the fonts, you can use any font that's on your system. So if you're doing it with a particular font that's associated with your job you're working on, you can use their font. Other examples I've got is you can use a date function. So here I can make the date tick through. I can't remember the significant. There was a point to the dates I've chosen, but I can't remember what the point was. But anyway, so you can make it count through dates. And then likewise, you've got different date styles. So you can see down here, you can change the date format. So that's how we use it in the UK. If you were in the States, for example, you could switch it to have the month first. So it's quite flexible in that regard. And again, it's a good way to count up dates. And then similarly, time, which you can use that as a timecode generator if you wanted to put burnt-in timecode a bit more stylized, or if you're doing a pseudo security cam with the timecode spinning, it's useful for that. I see Niels is asking a question.
Sorry, yes, I was going to say that Niels has got a question, if I could interrupt you a second there, Jason, about keeping the numbers in place. I've had success with monospace fonts for that particular setup, but I don't know if you've experimented much with that.
I have experimented and I haven't had any success with that. So obviously monospace is probably a good way to do it. Do you know one? Here we go. What about IBM Plex Mono? Yeah, so you can see that's keeping them locked in place to some degree. So other than using monospace fonts, no, there isn't a control in for that, but that could be, oh, there you go. So I actually changed the wrong one. So when you look at the actual one, I changed the font on. You can see that does keep them perfectly in place. So a monospace font is the trick to that. So jumping ahead, screen text. This for me is something, it's a good sort of, it goes along with HUD. I think it's a good way of making data. You can see here I've actually lifted the text off the website for Red Giant Universe explaining it, and it basically just types it out for me and scrolls it in place. Also, you can see it's got a red cursor that comes and goes, that you can control all of those attributes. So you can see I can pick the cursor color here. So it's very controllable. I find this useful as like blend this into a layer and use it as a background element. And it's quite nice because it's sort of datary stuff. There's also a number of presets you can see here, all sort of computery style text. So if we apply that, you can see it's all sort of computery style text. But the nice thing is that you can type in whatever you want. Textile is a similar thing. It's sort of just data, but you can't type in what you want on this. There's a number of presets and you're sort of locked to those presets. So it's not as useful as the screen text, but it's worth knowing. I've actually used that. In fact, one of the examples I'll show later, I've used that just to generate some sort of datary looking background. And you can control the scroll speed, line spacing. There's quite a lot of control within that. And of course, as is the case with all of these tools, pretty much everything in it is keyframeable. So you could have the color of the cursor changing or the font color changing over time. Next one we've got is title motion. This is quite a cool way to make just sort of simple titles or bring in a title. If you've got a logo or something, it's just sort of a preset animations. You can see that sort of flips in with some bounce. In this case, I haven't used a logo. Within it, it has a couple of shapes, and it's got shapes, it's got lines, it's got different aspects that you can build your own logos with if you want. And then there's sort of basic animation. So you see I've just made this a wacky shape just to sort of show the scope of it. But the idea is more the motion than the tool. You could drop that on a logo and have a logo pop in that way. So that's quite a nice way to animate in. So if we just sort of change it to that one, you can see it's changed the text to the default. It needs a bit of work, but you can just see a different animation, and then you can go and adjust everything how you like. Typecast, let's get back out here. Typecast is just basically a tool to bring things on. So it's sort of like a type on with some, you can see here, I've got big letters that sort of shoot in. I've got a couple of different examples here of things. So you can have like just the subtle words sort of pulling in, letters bursting in. Again, it's a nice way of bringing in text, or you can sort of have things ripple through. A couple of different tools for that sort of thing, quite useful. So it's sort of more dramatic. If we have a look in that tool, you could see, again, there's a load of different presets for different methods of bringing in text. Obviously, you could animate a lot of that within Premiere, but it would take you a lot of time. So this saves you a huge amount of time and lets you do something a little bit more creative. Type on is a similar idea, but you can see it sort of has a cursor. It's almost like typing on. And you can see the cursor stays and flashes. So it looks like that data entry sort of idea. Again, there's a massive presets with color and everything. And as usual, you can keyframe everything. You can see at the moment, I've only keyframed on the type on effect, but you can do the direction. So you can even make it random if you prefer. It sort of looks more like, it just gives it a bit of variety. Another couple of examples of that. So you can use one where you have attributes set in place. You can see also I've added a glow and scan lines to this, which is all done within the effects built into the tool, so you don't have to apply different layers. You can also control the randomization, and you can make the random characters and control what comes up in place. And you can see here I've got a yellow cursor, so you can actually control the font color and cursor differently. And one other little example.
The interesting thing about this, Jason, is that I've bumped into a number of broadcasters who've got a Avid and After Effects workflow, and they kind of use this a couple of different ways. One way is for the editors to kind of brainstorm the sorts of effects that they want, and the sort of style they want, and then give that preset, it's just like when you save a preset in one of these tools, to the After Effects team, and then the graphics team then develop that and render out some actual video material and then upload it to the server, and they're working that way around. And then the other way around I've seen is that the After Effects team, instead of actually rendering that, they give that a finished preset, something that's signed off with a look with those same settings. They'll set that up in After Effects and then send the preset over to the editors, and then they use that on the timeline. They just replace the text, so they don't have to do the whole rendered thing.
Yeah,
so
well,
it's quite an interesting way of just playing with it both ways.
Yeah, and I think that's the great thing about these tools, and the same that we've looked at over the last few weeks with all the Universe tools. The fact that we can save a preset means your design department could come up with a particular style like this green. Maybe you've got a stream of YouTube videos or promos that have this look, so you can set the style, the font, the amount of scan lines, glow, all those different attributes, the scroll rate, and then each week the editor can just drop in whatever text he wants, because it's as simple as, like on this one, for example, if we go to edit text, we can just go and you can see here's the text, which, as I had mentioned before, I've just nicked this off the Red Giant website. So you could simply add in any new text there, just put a load of rubbish at the front of it, and you'll see instantly that's updated. So it's a great way of creating a style that different people can share. So the last tool within the type tools, like these are just the standard within the text tools within Universe, is typographic. Typographic's quite a cool thing. It's one of the newer parts of Universe. You can see this example has a shape with 2 lines of text. Essentially, if we go to the presets, it's got a massive amount of presets in there, all kinds of styles and colors, and you can see the library there. And it's literally a case where you can just apply it, and now you can see we have some sort of green watercolor appearing with the text, having a little animation. Obviously, we can control every attribute. We can edit the text as usual. You've got the 2 lines, and you can even have different fonts on each line. So I don't know, let's go for something impact there to make it very obviously different. So we could type in whatever words we want. You could also change the colors of them. So each can have its own color. So it's infinitely controllable. This would be particularly good, in my opinion, for social media stuff if you want little pop-ups. Of course, this one's on a background right now, but you can simply turn off the background like that, and then that would key over a picture if I had a picture. And then obviously you can still shrink that down and move it wherever you want, as you'd expect. So if you wanted that over a talking head, very quick and easy to come up with sort of very stylized graphics. And again, like Simon brought up with the last one, you could make your own preset. Essentially, the tool is quite simple. You've got two text elements and 2 shape elements, and then the background, which you can turn on or off, which could be solid color or gradient. So the shapes can be, you can see in here, we have a shape library with some basic shapes, but you also have a custom layer. So you can bring in, choose from a library of all kinds of funky shapes in here. So you can see there the 2 different shapes in play at the same time. So you can sort of build a stylized look however you want and keep that and use it over and over again for a particular strand if you're doing YouTube videos. You can also obviously offset them, so maybe not quite that far, but you get the idea. You've got complete control of each layer, color. So it's a very useful tool for creating quick graphics that can be applied easily over time. So just to wrap up, so that's sort of a quick run through of the text tools. So you can see from an editing perspective, it gives you a huge amount of graphic capability that otherwise would be near impossible. At this point, I'll hand over to Nick, who has another cool trick to demonstrate.
And yeah, Jason, I totally agree with you in terms of just these tools inside of Premiere Pro or your nonlinear video editor offering you so much more control than some of the native tools do. Even especially the tools that can kind of fill a page of text, like the screen text, I absolutely love, because you can have filler text rather quickly. And you just showed how simple it was to like copy and paste material into that. And I, try to picturing setting that up with the native text tool in Premiere Pro would just take you a lot longer unless you were starting from a template that you had already built.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing that kind of gets me excited about text as a video editor is sometimes noting from a few weeks ago when we did a poll, the majority of people who were attending at that time were from Premiere Pro. And I myself like to figure out quick ways of how you can add more production value to your video edit by heading over to your motion graphic system for whatever NLE you're working with. So to that, it just becomes like, how can we leverage the tools inside of After Effects, and how can you get something out? The usual time limit that I give myself, Jason, before, let's say, farming it out to someone in motion graphics would be 15 minutes. So I wanted to show you a couple cool different ways of integrating some of the universe text tools that are available with some of the features of After Effects and how quickly you can work with some of the new workflows. And some of you may already know that there is a full-on redo of the RotoBrush tool inside of After Effects. It's being powered by something called Adobe Sensei, which is a really smart algorithm that's being used to try to help you grab a subject from a video frame. So in this example, I'm working on the layer level of this man, and I'm going to try to cut him out from the background shot. So here's the RotoBrush, and it automatically goes to the new version. And if you command click on the fly, you can actually make your brush a little bit bigger. And with my best paintbrush skills right now, I'm going to just try to select the man. And you can see it's already made a general selection of that character. I wasn't too careful in where I started painting, so I'm sort of in the middle of my shot right now that's in the timeline. But I've just made another brush, and I already have most of the subject selected on this frame. Now, if we zoom in on the shot, this would then become a question of how accurate you want this to be. But because it's just text that I want to place behind this subject, I don't necessarily have to be too accurate, but having something fairly accurate that can then be, used later on specific shots could be really helpful. So as I mentioned, this was just on the one frame. And if I click on this toggle alpha, we get a general sense for how this RotoBrush is holding up right now. And the magical part about this is that it's not only on this frame, but now it actually propagates on all of the frames of your given shot due to GPU, a bit of GPU acceleration. So I'm just command left arrowing to kind of move a few frames forward. And I can see that generally my selection right now is holding up pretty well. And there's a few different modes that you can use to sort of toggle between to sort of see your selection over time. And I'm fairly happy with the start of this result. Now, if you're not so happy or you have a subject that has a lot of hair, you essentially want to do a second round of correction here with the roto brush to sort of grab that subject out. And that would be to use something called the edge refinement tool, or sorry, the refine edge tool. After you've made your general selection, you can now paint on areas that you want to appear to be semi-transparent. And even in this view, I start to get an X-ray of my given matte where I can see the opaque area going to the full-on, sorry, the fully transparent area going to the fully opaque area, with gray being that semi-transparent area. And the best part is, based on your initial selection, it's going to move it through a majority of the frames here in your project. And, you know, with that AI algorithm working there in the background, it does it in a really fast way. I've found magnificently faster from the first roto brush tool. So
it seems to be much faster than
oh,
the first one, which it was years ago that came in. Might have even been CS6, kind of 2012,
yeah.
I think. And I did the similar thing, just spending time trying to make the edge work. But then this is so much faster than in the previous version. Because
Yeah,
the
and
first one, I remember you had to go left to right all the time. You couldn't just change your mind. If you did change your mind in earlier frames, you had to essentially redo everything. But this seems a much quicker way of doing it.
yeah, you'd have to do a lot more tweaking, I found. And, you know, this is a fairly great footage to do it on. The subject is very close to the camera. There's a clear kind of background plate. And with these selections and even the examples I've seen, it is so incredibly fast in order to cut out your subject. And just to mention here, Simon, it used to be that when you paint it, what would happen is that you see this little bar here, which is kind of called your edge span, would only be 20 frames to the left and 20 frames to the right of the frame that you were painting on. And now it's the entire length of the clip. So you don't have to essentially make multiple selections, because that was the suggestion back in the day, just to speed up the process with the roto brush. So now the fact that it even shows the full edge span saves a lot of time in your workflow. And while you were speaking, Simon, I actually froze my results, which is your next step. And I'll just show, you know, this is a fairly quick selection, but that's my matte, you know. And if I go back to my composition, I can see that my subject is cut out. Obviously, I could go back to the roto brush tool to refine, but I also have refinement tools in my effect controls. And that includes, you know, a feather, some of my favorites, which are being able to remove some of the chatter reduction around the edges, increase that, decontaminating the edge colors, as well as using motion blur, depending on where you want your subject to now exist. So now I have my, you know, subject cut out of my frame, and quickly I'm just going to make a duplicate copy of the subject, and on the duplicate, I'm going to remove the roto brush tool. So now I have two layers inside my project, one that's called background with nothing on it, and then there's my subject cut out. And now, you know, this motion is fairly subtle in the project, but another tool that you can use really quickly inside of After Effects is the ability to track a camera. So once I apply that to the background layer, it's going to initialize the effect. And just like the warp stabilizer inside of Premiere Pro, it's going to do the hard work and lifting for you. So not only are we able to remove subjects really quickly in After Effects if you send it over, but also then track the camera inside your scene, and in, you know, slow motion clips, as well as where there's a fairly decent amount of camera movement, you can get a pretty good results. And you'll see that I have now a series of tracking points that I can use. Now, if I'm looking for instant gratification, the idea here is that you'll see a target come up And this target is actually connecting 3 tracking points together to provide some perspective. Now, this is a fairly flat scene, so it didn't see too much of a perspective here, but I could try to either select one of these points instead, or even use my mouse to draw a lasso around those points to see if I can get a better perspective of a better selection there. And once I was satisfied with the initial selection, we can always tweak it. But for instant gratification, I'm just going to create text in the camera for now. If I turn on my man that's behind that and actually move my text to be behind the man, I now have, give it a second, but some text right behind the man because of the rotor brush tool. And also, if I just move a little bit forward, that text is tracked to the scene. Okay, so what about like the red giant tools now? I'm actually going to remove the text layer and select the background again where I have my camera tracker. I'm going to make a reference point to connect another layer to. And one way of doing that is to select, a series of points again, right click, but this time choose to create a null. If I select that null, it's just basically point information and rotation information from my 3D scene that I can connect any layer to. So let's all use that, where I'm going to create a solid in my project and name it typographic, because that's what I want to place on it. There is that white solid layer to which I will just apply the default typographic effect to. So let me go here and apply the effect. And while we can't see anything here on the first frame, you have this animated logo behind your subject. Now to get rid of that white on the typographic layer, I'm going to change the blend mode to none. And then just reposition this here. So it's not connected to the scene, but we're going to in a second. So Jason was mentioning earlier, you have this animated logo right away. And from the list, I'm just going to choose a preset from that large preset list that we saw. There's quite a few to choose from. And I'll end up going with one of these. I love these brush assets. So I'll choose the Think Twice preset. And just like Jason did, because this comes with a background, I'll go to the background and zero this out, the actual background opacity. And just to show you, I'm going to go to the shape section, and rather than reference this polygon, I'm going to choose a shape library and also point out that here you can add your own custom layer. So any shape layer could be referenced here and brought into typographic. So I'll go into my shape custom settings and here choose a shape from the library. Let's go with a home. There we go. To which I'll now increase the width and get rid of that rotation that was added to the previous shape. Now going to my first shape, I'm literally just going to bring down the width. And I could start to, edit the text on the farm. And a second line of that here, a story. So I have this typographic image, and now for the integration, what I'll do is I'm going to make it 3D. And I'm going to do this trick on in order to kind of move this layer to the position of where this null object is, or to its position values, just to show you. I'm going to shift click this pick whip and attach it there. And it sort of kind of tries to move it into a place of where that null object is. I'll still have to offset it, but now it's at least taking the motion. And there we have, this moves just a little bit faster. We can see that this is now kind of tracked to the motion of the scene. And we also get the ability with this animation, which I think is just super cool. I have an example that is a little bit further along where, that now that this is a 3D object, you can have it also integrate with After Effects lights to try to mimic the lighting in the scene. And the only other thing that I added in this example was the match grain effect to match the grain of the original shot and integrate it. And if I wasn't talking, I think I could have done this slightly quicker, but the whole idea here is that, sending over a clip with After Effects as tools, we can kind of go a long way to stretch out the production value of a given piece.
That's really interesting, especially the time that you're not spending on this. I liked your comment right at the beginning where you said 15 minutes. And I was just going to ask you both about how much time you tend to spend on these sorts of things, whether you give yourself an artificial time limit, because I've spoken to a number of designers at various facilities, and they sometimes say it's as crazy as 4-hour cycles to come up from a blank piece of paper to a series of rendered material for a 30-second piece. And sometimes it's a bit longer, sometimes they get a whole day at it. But if you're in editing mode and you have to come up with some text titles for this, how much time do you spend on that typically?
So I guess now, to answer that question on my front, Simon, because I'm kind of experienced at doing some of these things, I do, and I'm also the one who's responsible with budgeting a project or production. My budget usually accounts for periods of 15 minutes to play with, let's say, 3 or 4 shots on a given shot or a shorter production. And then anything beyond that, I would farm it out to someone else. And that's mostly just on budgets where they're tight and the timing is tight. But it's also just a restriction for me to try not to necessarily play too much and spend too much where I'm not, the budget gets stressed, if that makes sense, to add some perspective. But in the past, I used to play around with this quite a bit or experiment on certain productions in order to get good and faster at these type of treatments, if that makes sense. Jason,
yeah. So I was going to follow on from what Nick was saying. I find that quite often playing around with the tools, coming up with ideas, even when you're working for a client, sometimes you come up with something that really doesn't work, but it's worth remembering what you did, because what might not work for one job might be the perfect answer for the next job. So the more experience you have playing with these tools, the more you can think of things quickly. I think to answer your question, Simon, for me, because I tend to work on quite big productions, I'm sort of a small part of a big machine. It all comes down to the preparedness of the producer. So a producer will come into the room and want to cut something. If they're really organized, we might get a 9-hour edit session to edit a 4-minute feature, for example. If we can get the bed cut in half the day, then I can spend half a day playing with things and grading it. And it kind of all comes down to budget. The more budget you've got, the more time we can spend. I think it's sort of the same with color. A lot of the work I do, I mix the audio, I color grade it, I do the graphics, I have to do everything. And you're turning around sort of 4 minutes of high-end television in a day. So it really depends. If you're looking for shots, if the producer comes in with 100 goals for a football feature and expects you to look at the 100 goals, then half your day is going to be spent looking at goals to choose which one. If they've prepared and tell you exactly what they want, then you've got more time to play and come up with ideas.
I think you also mentioned on a previous session that there's been a trend of coming up with some templates ahead of time, not necessarily the finished designs, because the teams will have a different aspect on the look and feel of it, depending on who it is. But there is some sort of effort ahead of time to give you more time just as you're pushing up towards broadcast.
Yeah, I think that again comes down to budget. It depends on the client. Some of my bigger clients will spend, like, for example, I'm working on a project for the Euros, which should have been on in June, and they've allowed me 4 weeks to prepare for this item that will be used during the Euros. And the whole idea is, if I get it all nailed and get the templates working, it means editors can turn these things around really quickly because they've only got 4 or 5 hours to do them with a lot of graphics and statistics-based things. So that way it's a good investment, because by spending time in advance, it means one editor can turn around a lot of work, whereas the alternative would be to have 4 or 5 editors on location, which obviously costs money in hotels, pay, all the flights, everything else. So it's sort of bigger clients are prepared to spend money. It's sort of, a lot of TV used to work like that. There used to be a big thing called pre-production that seems to have disappeared for the most part from post anyway. If you plan in advance, I believe in the end you save money. And that's the idea,
totally
is
agree.
spend a bit in the beginning and you end up with a better result in the end.
Absolutely. Cool. Nick's been playing whilst we've been chatting, I can see.
Yeah, no, I was just getting my other project ready just to keep things flowing and stuff like that. And I kind of totally agree with the idea of experimenting. And then love the idea, Jason, that you mentioned about saving your experiments, because you never know when some of that stuff will come in handy, even if you've gone down the wrong path in a given project.
Definitely.
I wanted to show one more thing in terms of integration inside of After Effects. And I'm just going to kind of add some hacker text here to the screen and just do a few things in order to get that. And for this specific example, it lent itself well to just use After Effects' built-in tracker. There was another thought I had, I just didn't have the time to get around to it, where inside of the VFX suite, if you guys have that available, there is a planar tracker, kingpin tracker, that you could use to place on a logo and potentially position it here on the screen. And that should work pretty well, especially with this type of texture. But I did rely on the handy built-in old After Effects point tracker. And just kind of like the rotobrush tool, it works on the layer level of a given shot. And the whole idea here is that I want to track the motion in the shot. And I'm going to use this track type specifically called perspective corner pin. What this does is it should show you that there are 4 tracking points that I need to take, and essentially using the default here, have it tracked to the edges of the screen. I'm not sure, I feel like I'm dragging this wrong. Oh yeah, I can't go beyond the border of the other one, or the placement doesn't go right. So I have to drag down point number 3 kind of to the edge here, and 2 and so forth. And I basically grab these points, drag them to their right location, always waiting for that black pointer in order to do so. And then once this was set up, if you look inside my tracker panel when I'm doing this, you might notice that it's already targeted this solid layer inside my composition. And once the track is finished and successful, I can take the default settings of this tracker, track this forward, and then apply it to that gray solid, which is then going to be placed, or I'll place the hacker text on top of that. So I don't need to track this whole clip, and I would have to use another method to kind of get rid of that person there, but I can take my existing tracking data from here. In fact, let me select this actual source again, and then just apply it to that gray solid that's inside my project. And just to show you what happened, if I turn it on and turn off the actual clip, the solid was the full frame of the composition. It scaled it down with the corner pin effect, as well as applied position data towards it. If I needed to move or tweak this in any way, it would just be an example of putting on a null object. Now, for this in particular, just to sort of rewind forward a little bit, on the actual layer to get rid of the green screen, I added Primat here and had it reference an After Effects mask, so that to throw on a garbage mat here and quickly get out of the green screen. And it took me about 3 manual clicks in order to do that. And I found that that result was actually quicker than Keylight in this specific instance. I was able to get that green quickly, as well as use spill suppression to get the majority of the edges out. And then on the gray solid, there's a few things happening here, but I've got a universe hacker text, which I animated without keyframes, and this was added in the newest release. You actually can set the animation timing to automatic. And from that, based on some of these settings, such as transition start and end, you can adjust the timing of when it moves from one set of characters to the other, which are defined in the edit text section. So that, combined with adding a match grain effect again, along with an effect that I've come to love recently, it's called Color Link. And what Color Link does in After Effects is it allows you to reference a clip and the lighting in that clip. So anything where there might be a little bit of a glow or light fluctuation, you can then take that and apply that using a blend mode onto another layer to integrate it better into the shot. So that was the other kind of integration that I wanted to show in After Effects, guys. Using kind of hacker text and again, sort of seeing a shot and potentially sending it over to After Effects where you can get something done in about a 10 to 15 minute period using the collection of tools inside of After Effects and then within your Red Giant collection of products. So
this is a nice approach, because one of the other things that people have said about these tools is that, especially if you're an ad agency, you have to do endless pitches for different ideas. And then sometimes they make their way into the final project. But if you're able to come up with these ideas and do extra iterations of it without having to then do it from scratch, and doing it in the new time limit, the unit of time, which is now 15 minutes, as I understand, then that's a great way to kind of test out different ideas.
Yeah, and this sort of tracking and sort of like, depending on the motion and movement in the shot, you'll get more and more used to when you can send this over and use that tracking and AI technology. The only other thing I wanted to mention in terms of tricks that's within the VFX suite that should be known too is that there is in the last release, a lens distortion tool. So if you have ultra wide clips, you can identify lines in your shot and then work inside what's called a pre-comp to place your text, whether it being using like After Effects' tracking tools, and then have that text, like this numbers effect, be distorted just like your clip. As you can see, as it gets closer to the edges of the frame. There's a great example, I think, also on the Red Giant site where they take a logo and place it in the middle of the field. It's not text, so I didn't want to show that, but that logo is then stretched based on the distorted angles here inside this composition and integrated. It just kind of makes everything feel a little bit more alive. And that was
also, it tracks better if you've got an undistorted image. If you're tracking on the undistorted comp as well, so that's usually what causes the tracks to kind of fail, especially if you've got footage which is shot from a camera. I was going to say a camera, I meant a phone, although they're fastly becoming the same thing, aren't they?
Yes. So yeah, so like this definitely did help the track, and then while this looks all weird, the actual pre-comp itself is also set to a guide layer. So the only thing that the main After Effects comp is seeing is the original plate and then the text inside, which is pretty cool. Another thing that was, able to integrate, I think, in less than 15 minutes, Simon. That's going to be my number or time limit of choice for my presentation. Yeah, cool. Jason, I know you had some more stuff to show, so I'm going to hand this back over to you. You're the Maxon organizer, so you should see it coming up on the screen there.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
So a few other things back within Premiere of just using different ways of treating text and ways of dealing with things differently. One of the tools I quite like, which we looked at sometime in the last couple of weeks, one of my favorites is Luster. Luster creates sort of I don't know, you could almost say an 80s look 3D. You can see there's a number of preset ones, and you can see here the simple word, and you can see it looks quite 3D with an edge and a bit of a shadow, and it looks quite glassy. But by playing with the controls, because as usual there's a load of different controls, you can make it look like glass, and you can see I've sort of rippled the reflection through it, and it looks quite convincingly like glass, I think. The luster is quite a nice idea. Like this is another one where I've just got as an element of it flying through, and you can see once you've got it set up like that, you can always come in and choose a preset, and you'll see because of the settings I've got, if we go disco gold, you can see you get a little bit of the gold hinting through it. So you can sort of see it's keeping the animation I've got on there. You can just play with different looks and experiment and come up with different ideas. It's quite a quick way of generating a text layer like that. Could be quite nice for an opener or whatever. Sort of similarly on the glass hook, there's the universe prism displacement. You can see it's kind of quite a stylized thing, but basically I've nested the text, and what I've done is I've actually put a hacker text in here. So the same as we went through before, where the hacker text goes from, if we turn that off so you can see, it's basically just source text through to destination text. But I've nested that so that the tool above will work, the prism displacement. And then prism displacement basically just sort of displaces the image around the text. You can see you end up with the text rippling through. Obviously, because of the nature of this prism displacement, it distorts the image and creates a very stylized look, but it could be something you want. I think my thing here is, it's what I was talking about before, is playing with things. Like I'm always sort of toying with the tools to see what I can get them to do that's a bit different. And you save things and think, well, that might come in handy for something. Off the top of my head right now, I can't think what, but it's certainly a stylized look. And that's using the prism displacement. Likewise, in Premiere, some of the VFX suite works, and there's a chromatic displacement tool in there. And this does a similar thing, but it's sort of quite a clean, glassy look. And you can see that's a similar thing. That in this case, I've actually just made a PNG of that text. And then you can control how much that pushes through the image, and it's quite sharp and clean. So it's not distorting the image everywhere like the prism displacement is, but good if you just want sort of glassy looking text. A couple of other ideas using different tools. So within the Trapcode suite, we have Shine. Shine's always a good one just to add to text. You can see here we've got sort of different colors based on the opacity of the light strength. You can see that's quite a realistic looking light gray that can easily be applied to text. And then similarly, the next one, again, I've done the same thing, but applying it to hacker text. So you can sort of layer up the different tools. You can see rather than just straight text, I'm using hacker text to generate the light rays. So you sort of combine the different tools to do sort of more complex things. And this next one is actually the middle from one of the transitions I did last week. But you can see here's where the screen text, even though the text is not really controllable, all I wanted here is a sort of data looking thing. And then you can see we've got the hacker text and Shine again. So it's sort of layering, and the two different layers, the blurry one and the solid one, are all on the same layer. So it gives you an interesting background, better than just having it on black. Another tool, there's a tool called Point Zoom. If we come into here, we'll have to remember where it is. It's in Glow. Point Zoom creates almost like a projector type effect. So I've done something here where I've actually got it applied, but you can see as it comes in, it's sort of, the light almost sort of bursts on. So I've just got the text animating, but you can see it's almost like that's coming from a projector. It's quite a nice look. And then obviously you can add sort of noise to it and make it look more smoky. But it's another way of sort of applying different effects. And again, that's just being applied to a standard text, but you could do that to hacker text again or something else. Another tool that is unusual is Universe HEATWAVE. And it basically puts like a heat haze. You can see it rippling the text. And where that's brilliant is if you're doing something where you're compositing fire. So here I've got fire. When you put the fire over the top of the heat haze, it makes it look that real sort of distortion look that you get when you're looking through fire at something. Interestingly here, this is a really old analog shot of fire. There's another tool which is probably quite unknown called Unmult. Unmult this has got no matte shape. This is just a filmed shot of fire. And to pull a key, rather than mess around with the luminance key, using Unmult, it actually extracts a key for you quite quickly. And you can see there's a couple of presets. It's basically Unmult on white or Unmult on black. It basically just cuts the key out for you. So it's quite a useful tool for cutting something out. So it allows me to key the fire on quite nicely. You can see that heat wave is quite a cool effect. Another thing is there's a number of glows like edge tools. And where's the one I've used here? Ecto is kind of a Ghostbuster-esque tool, and you can enhance the edges. You can see here I've almost got like a fiery red energy around the text. And again, this is applied to that same hacker text. It's almost like the energy comes across as it changes. So I think the thing is you can sort of play around with all kinds of effects. Like half of these tools can be used in ways to make text more interesting, or likewise you could apply a VHS effect onto the text. And then part of what I was talking about with playing, one final example I've got, which is something that almost surprised me. With the generators, we have, actually it's not motion graphics, we have Array Gun, the tool we looked at for building different backgrounds. And I thought, I was playing around with that the other day, and I thought it'd be interesting if you could, instead of having circles or crosses, you could put text. And of course, that's possible. So instead of having all these funny shapes, I've decided to apply text. And rather than just straight text, again, I've applied my hacker text. And you can see these all randomly rotate and change in scale and change in color, so they're all different colors. And you can see that will still do the hacker thing through to our destination text. So obviously that's quite a violent background, but you can see the potential if the colors were knocked back so they were all sort of tones of the same blue. It's quite powerful what you can do with text and building up different elements. So that was something that even caught me by surprise. We go into the effects controls. Yeah, so it was just within the shapes. The shape, you have a load of different shapes that you can choose from, which are all in the library, but you can also choose a custom layer. So I just pointed it at a custom layer, hid the text underneath, which is actually the hacker text nested, and just telling it to look at video 1. And then obviously I've got random colors, which there's all kinds of color capability, and then animated a few different things. I've got most of it's all sort of automatic because it's part of the generator itself. But quite interesting what you could do with that. And likewise, if you didn't want text, if you just wanted to use like question marks, for example, you could actually have a layer of question marks. So it really opens the door to any shape you want. So that could be logos or anything. So that's a few other things just to get you thinking about ways of using the tools differently. Don't know if we've got any questions we can.
That's a really interesting use, especially that source layer on that last example. An array gun, being able to just take that custom layer, and I can see you doing this within 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, you could do that even less.
Yes. That's going to be the new unit of time that's going to come back to haunt you, Nick.
I know. But I love this idea that you shared, Jason, about the array gun and referencing text. There's like so many cool uses you can do with that, and the kind of random replication that it has there and the additional movement that it would add.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things I'm always looking for is, because I think in design, text is one of the most powerful elements you can use in design. And I suffer the problem that a lot of the work I do is for an international audience. So working on international events, they might be sold to Germany and they want all the text in German, and France wants it in French. So the fact that we can do things where I can have multiple languages, it adds to things, because we always find that if we edit a story on a Spanish football club, for example, it's acceptable to put Spanish text in that. So we tend to do, it tends to open the door to more possibilities when you have tools that allow you to use text creatively.
Yeah.
Just reading a question from Drake about the text instances in the array gun. I think what you're referring to is actually offsetting the time, because you can see they're all changing at the same time. I couldn't actually find a way to make that happen. So it appears to be that every instance is the same instance. It would be nice if you could randomize that, which I've got to play a bit more and see if that's possible. And it could possibly be a feature request. You were going to say something, Simon?
I just noticed Hardy's question after that about doing glitch effects. And one of the 20-second tips that we uploaded a while ago does exactly that. So I was just trying to find that as you were giving an example.
We could go into the universe dashboard and apply a glitch over the top of what we've got there, and there's a glitch effect.
There you go.
So you don't even need 15 minutes, you need about 7 seconds.
Yeah. There's probably
that's very true.
Glitch effect, like all the other tools, there's a load of different possibilities already preset, and then as usual, you've got hundreds of controls. You can animate everything and control every single attribute.
Even thinking about this, Jason, when you bring up things like the glitch, or you could add hollow matrix and have a cool glitch and look specifically to certain text forms. It has me thinking about how you could integrate that using the After Effects and Mogerts, right? Where you could use After Effects' text engine and then animate text like fade it in and out, and then apply one of these glitch effects over that text, and then inside your essential graphics be able to then apply that over and over again, and even share it against other people who are using Mogurts and Premiere, granted that they have a universe installed on their system.
Yeah, definitely. There's an example that you just said using holometrics.
Question there from Mido as well. Could you put in an array gun? And so instead of text, you could put in a full composition. So it was loading various shapes and texts. Well, absolutely. That's exactly the example, or exactly the workflow that Jason was showing, because it's targeting a layer. And so that's the nice thing about it. So that as it moves through time, each new frame is going to be sending a new graphic to that. So that would be a nice way of doing it.
Yeah, and then another question, what about text hologram? You can see that example I did previously of the hacker text with Ecto creating the edges. I've just simply applied holometrics effect to that, and then on top of that I've applied the point zoom, so it gives you that sort of hologram effect. So you can see all of these things are easy to do. We can turn off the Ecto so it's not too full on, and there you can see it's just a hologram, but the Ecto actually helps with that.
Nice. I've just seen the time. Is it really 57 minutes in? Goodness.
It's amazing how quickly it flies by.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to grab the screen if I can, and just point out a couple of things just to wrap up.
Of course.
Let's make me presenter again. And turn my webcam back on. Here we go. So just to follow up those, I did find the example that Maida was referencing. So on the main YouTube channel that we've got as the recordings for all these sessions, we've also got lots and lots of small little 20-second tips. And so I just went in there, typed in the search for glitch, and then it comes up with this one was the one I wanted to point out, which then if you jump into the 20 seconds of it, it's just a small amount of displacement, then gives you the ability to do a very slight glitch on here, because some of the presets are pretty full on. But if you choose a text preset which has smaller blocks and then manipulate the pattern size, this is the thing, in the wide glitch settings, the pattern size will then let you set how big or how small those glitches are. That's a pretty good way of adding something which is slightly more subtle. And I think this one comes with a download file for this. Yes, there's a project file in there as well, so you can kind of take that apart too. Fantastic. And just a reminder for next week, we have a new month of webinars, and there's a new topic. We're looking at color correction and fixing images and seeing how far we can break them, and what does it really mean to be a colorist, and what you need to know and what you can get away with. And we're going to have examples and discussions all the way through those things as well. And just another example, also a comment about the Maxon volume program training channel, is that this is where you'll find the recordings, and so this recording will be up in a few hours as well. There was a couple of questions about that earlier on. So thank you everyone for your feedback, and I know there's a comment from Alberto, it's an hour earlier, so it caught you out. Almost called us out as well, because it always seems a bit weird doing things when we're interacting with the States, and especially with Nick. It's an hour earlier for you, Nick, as well, because you're in Toronto.
Yes, it is.
well remembered. Exactly. Visions of just like frantically saying, you realize we're starting now. But anywho, so thank you again, everybody, for carving out this time for us, but especially thank you to Nick and Jason for generously sharing all your tips and your secrets, if you like, because we're kind of seeing behind the curtain and seeing sorts of magic that you can pull together in a short amount of time. The 1 unit of graphics time, now as I shall refer to it.
The 1 unit of graphics time, yes.
The quarter of an hour, absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, thank you so much for the comments. If you've got any further questions, send us an email, training@maxon.net. We'd be delighted to follow up, especially if you've got suggestions for future sessions as well. And if you're interested, we're planning some Redshift sessions in December, as well as some follow-up trap code things. So we'll keep your eyes looking out for the emails, and we'll let you know about that. Also let you know on the social channels. So if you follow Maxon or Red Giant on Twitter, you'll see those too. So we're trying to keep a variety of different topics as we go through these sessions. Fantastic. So thank you again, everyone, and stay healthy, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks,
See you later.
everybody.
Good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers, bye.